you were deployed to Iraq. Were there any memories, experiences that changed you, or in general, like you're probably a different man on the other side of it? How did that time change you?
I think there was two main takeaways that I took, right? So one was not a specific moment, but on multiple occasions. I remember we were driving down the road and I would look and there would be a 10, 12, 14-year-old kid. And if you've never seen somebody who literally has hate and disdain in their eyes.
Towards you?
Just not necessarily to you personally, just to the uniform, to what you stand for, to all this stuff. When you see it, you see it. Right. And I always think of if you've ever watched the movie 12 Strong, and in it, they've got this Afghanistan warlord, and he's talking to a bunch of soldiers, and he says, you don't have killer eyes. You do. And he's just like, he can just tell. Right. He's seen so many soldiers. And so I think that was a memory on a number of occasions where I just saw young kids and I just said, they hate us. Right. And it's not you personally, it's what you stand for. But the really big event was when you first get to these combat zones, a lot of times what will happen is your unit teams up with a unit that's leaving, and there's a handoff, and it happens over a couple of weeks. And so you can imagine almost 1% of our team goes out with 99% of their team, then 5, 95, 10, 90, all the way till it's 50-50. And then eventually it rotates, and then it's majority of our team and a small number of their team. And so what a lot of people will explain is the two most dangerous times in war are actually the first 2 or 3 weeks and the last 2 or 3 weeks. When you first get there, you don't know who the people are, you don't know the terrain, you don't know, kind of the local cultures and who to look out for, what signs, all that kind of stuff. And the last 2 or 3 weeks is you basically think you've survived the deployment. You're looking forward to going home, so you become complacent, things like that. And so we made it through that transition period with no issues. But literally the very first mission that we went out as a team ourselves, 100%, there was 2 separate incidents. One was we were driving in the middle of the night, and what we think was a sniper shot at a truck that I was in. I was standing up outside of it along with another guy. And that was kind of just a wake-up call again of, I've never been shot at before. Right. And so I'll never forget, you kind of heard this whiz go by, and the guy next to me was from rural Pennsylvania. And he just said, look, I've never been shot at before either, but I've done a lot of hunting. Get the fuck down. Right? So, okay. And so we kept driving that night. And later on in the night, an IED went off. A guy ran over an IED who was at the front of the convoy. And when that IED went off, again, I had never been in a convoy that had been blown up before, but the training kicks in. And so immediately every single person starts screaming out, IED, IED, and they start looking and trying to figure it out. And you realize the United States military did a fantastic job training us before we went, because in that moment, nobody thought about anything. You just did what you had been programmed to do. And so ultimately, kind of through the end of that event, there was a U.S. soldier that ended up dying. He was shot in the head. And when we got back to the base, kind of after that entire event, I think it just hit us. We are at war. And if we make mistakes here, that is the cost of, kind of those mistakes. And this was somebody who I didn't know. It was somebody who literally showed up kind of as secondary support for our unit, and basically was there to help us, right? And so it was one of those weird situations where you have this emotional connection because it's somebody who shared an event with you, but you didn't know them, right? And you learn their name later, and you understand that they have a family and they have young kids and all this stuff. And so again, as a 20-year-old kid, you're kind of processing all this, and you just realize, like, the gun I have in my hands, it's real for a reason, right? And we better take this seriously. This is not, us joking around in kind of the barracks and, all the things that you would expect, guys are doing in the Army. So I think that was like the moment where I said, hey, I'm going to learn a lot here, and I got to make sure I get home.
And you snap it into the training. But nevertheless, I mean, you're somebody who thinks philosophically about this world now, right? You're very intelligent and thinks deeply about the world. So looking back, you mentioned hatred in the 14-year-old kid's eyes. There's death. So the way you kind of describe this whole story is like training kicks in. This shit is serious. Like, this is, there's a reason there's a gun in your hand. So there's a strategic element. There's like, you have to get the job done. There's a task in hand. But at the same time, if you zoom out, there's a kid who has hate for you. Some of those kids would probably, if they could, would kill you for the thing you stand for in the uniform. And then there's bullets flying at you. And then there's people that some of them you might already care for deeply are dying. What the hell do you make of that? Do you think about that? Does any of that haunt you? How do you think about the world having witnessed that?
Yeah. A lot of times when we would talk about it, we were there. If I was that kid, I would want to kill that person too, right? I would have hatred as well, right? Imagine if in the United States tomorrow you and I woke up and there was tanks rolling down the street from another country, and they were basically imposing their rules on us, whether they thought it was the right thing to do or not. The soldiers were there, they were doing this. We would probably feel not so great about it, right? At kind of a minimum, and at a maximum, we'd be really, really pissed off. We would fight back. And so what you don't understand when you're in the heat of the moment is, why does this person feel this way? And so what's very weird is, well, what happens if a year ago, U.S. soldiers came through, they got shot at, they returned fire, and they killed that kid's uncle? You'd be pissed off, right? And so you just start to understand, like, we look at war very black and white. We look at it very much from a clinical perspective. We're going to go kind of invade somewhere. We are the most dominant military in the world. We're very good at invading, and we will crush wherever we invade. But when you're actually on the ground, what you understand is the humanity of it all, right? And so what becomes very interesting is pretty much every veteran I know that comes back, they're some of the largest pacifists in the world. And I always revert back to Marcus Luttrell, who's a famous Navy SEAL, and there's a movie made about him and his story. He gave a speech one time that I saw, and he basically said, listen, if you're a politician, your job is to be the diplomat. Do everything you possibly can not to send me and my friends anywhere. Because when you send us, we're going to bring hell with us, right? And understand that is the business that we are in. But every single other person up until we get sent has a job to do to prevent having to send us. And I think that ultimately that's where you see a lot of kind of this generation that has fought in Iraq and Afghanistan that says, listen, maybe we shouldn't be running around the world being the police. Maybe we shouldn't be going and invading all these different countries, because when you actually get to see firsthand what happens, it's just something that we should avoid at all costs. But if we have to go, or we have to actually send soldiers somewhere, understand what happens when that occurs. And, the United States is the best in the world at doing it.